How's it rockin', Dween Nation? You're listening to the Dween Sports Podcast. We're about to get underway. But before you give us a listen, we'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe, and share. We are posting weekly sports content, and we want to build up the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy.
Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and we are back to discuss Week 9. It's in the books now. We are recording as of the ending of Monday night's OT thriller, you would say. Obviously, right when Mahomes got the ball in OT, we were like, yeah, it's pretty much wraps, unfortunately, for Buccaneers fans and people who wanted to see some upsets on the horizon, but that did not happen. But still, all in all, a very good game to watch. We saw Hopkins kind of have his first coming out party with the Chiefs, and then Kelsey had a great game. I think he hit 100 yards, 14 catches and a touchdown. Or not a touchdown, 14 catches. But he was balling today. And then, of course, Kareem Hunt obviously sealed the deal. I mean, what a season he's having, a resurgence he's having this season. But this episode is focusing on the waiver wire for Week 10. So we're looking ahead. Guys, you need to pick up. There were some injuries of note this week that we will discuss in further detail, and some that affect waiver wire pickups that you need to have. But, before we dive into the four names each of us will drop today, how you doing, Genoa?
Yo, Dween Nation. Justin, I'm doing so good. You kind of mentioned a couple things on that Chiefs game that we just saw. I think I was watching the, Manning cast. I kind of switched from Manning cast to regular kind of cast there. Peyton Manning was like, oh, Chiefs are getting ball. Okay. You kind of did it there. But hey, Kareem Hunt just won me a matchup in our uncle's league. So I needed to win very bad in that league. So I'm feeling pretty good post. And you and I think we picked the Chiefs this week, so our predictions are looking pretty good there.
Yeah.
And Justin, one last thing, I want to toot my own horn, just I don't want to. However, I did predict the Chiefs having this dominant start to the season. Obviously, I did have Mahomes having this MVP-like campaign. But hey, at least I got half of it right. They are undefeated. I'm excited to be here. But hey, we're on the road to Week 10, and I'm excited to get into these waiver wire picks.
Yeah, I want to give you some more credit too. Obviously the Vikings did pull off the victory on Sunday night, but you had the prediction a couple weeks ago that there would be some struggles, and they lost 2 straight, and they kind of struggled out the gate through the first half. Obviously, we're shut out in the first half against Indianapolis, but yeah, you're on it. And this week our game picks, we both went 12-3, so both dominated on the game picks. I think I had Cleveland, the Giants, and the Saints wrong, and you had the Cowboys, the Browns, and the Bears wrong. So we had a couple mixes, so that was interesting. But we did good. We kicked butt. Doing good on the season. Before we dive into this, is just fun to talk about. I'm 88-50 on the season in game picks, which is 63.7% correct, and you're 92-46. Or 66% correct. So you're beating me still by 4 games. But we're both doing pretty good on our picks. But anyway, past all of that, game picks are fun. Week 9 was a blast. And we're headed to Week 10 with the waiver wire. And I'll start us off at quarterback. And this is directly because of some quarterback injury news. And that is because Dak Prescott is now looking to be week to week. I'd expect him to miss at least 2 games with the injury to his hamstring. And in doing so, brings along Cooper Rush to be the starting quarterback again for the Dallas Cowboys. And I have him as my quarterback pickup this week. He plays Philadelphia at home. Then he plays Houston at home the next 2 games for him. Then he plays Washington. So 3 straight pretty plus matchups that I think Cooper Rush, we've seen him in spots be good, especially, 2 years ago when Dak got hurt in the first game, and then he was the quarterback for the next 5 weeks, and I think he only lost 1 game through that stretch. But I think if as long as CD stays healthy, I know he's got the AC joint sprain in his shoulder, but I think he will still play just through the injury. But as long as CD's out there, I think Cooper Rush will be a very solid streaming quarterback that you can have. He's got some good matchups. So if you need somebody to throw into your lineup, especially in a week 10, where we got 4 byes, Cleveland, Green Bay, Las Vegas, and Seattle. So maybe you got Jordan Love. Maybe it's Cooper Rush who's available in 99.9% of NFL fantasy leagues. So he's out there. Just scoop him up, and you can play him this week against a division rival.
Yeah, Justin, Cooper Rush is a sneaky pick there. I might have to pick him up in one of our main leagues, as I do have Jordan Love, who's hurt / going on a bye week.
Right.
And you know what, Justin? Something to point out from this game. I know I picked the Dallas Cowboys to win this game. Like you mentioned, it was one of my picks that I got wrong. But looking into this game, I did like what I saw out of Cooper Rush. I think he kind of got pushed in there, I would say, the end of the third quarter,
Correct.
going to the fourth. And he played most of the fourth quarter. But you know what, Justin? Here's something interesting that I want to point out here. First of all, Dak Prescott only passed for 133 yards. And then Cooper Rush came in at the end of the third quarter and was able to get 115. So only 17 less yards there and 5 less completions there. Very interesting for a guy that, you can argue that Dak played the majority of this game and Cooper was just kind of thrown in there. They both threw a touchdown pass. I do believe that touchdown pass was to Tolbert that Cooper Rush had. So you got to look at going into next week. I do like your pick, and I might have to take your advice because, a report came out today that CeeDee Lamb, who also kind of went out late in that game, his injury's not serious. So you have CeeDee Lamb to throw to. You have Jake Ferguson, who had 71 yards for 7 catches yesterday. And then you have Tolbert, who scored the touchdown. So you have 3 guys that can go in there. And, this is kind of funny. A couple years ago, I would say 2 years ago, was the year that Philadelphia went to the Super Bowl. They went to Jerry World. I think it was on Christmas time, and it was flipped. Dak Prescott played, but Jalen Hurts was out with an injury, and Gardner Minshew came in. I think he had a great game. Now this year going into Jerry World, it's going to be flipped. It's going to be Jalen Hurts is going to be playing, but not Dak Prescott. It's going to be Cooper Rush. So, and that game was a shootout, Justin, by the way, from what I remember, a big-time shootout. So hopefully we get some fireworks this weekend in Jerry World. Definitely like the Cooper Rush pick. And, you mentioned in 2022, Dak Prescott, he kind of goes out week 1 against the Buccaneers. I think he had a thumb injury or something like that. And I think they went like 6-1. And another coincidence is I think that only Cooper Rush loss was in Philadelphia on a Sunday night. So it's kind of crazy how things work that these two teams will now be matched up this Sunday in Jerry World. So pretty crazy coincidence there for our, Dwayne Nation. For me, Justin, I'm going to go with Trevor Lawrence. He had a pretty decent game yesterday in Philadelphia. I did not expect him to kind of, have this, kind of game to kind of cut the lead short. Philadelphia kind of went off to a 19-point lead to start the game. And it looked like this was going to be a rout, but no, Jacksonville came back in. They made it close. And, these Jags are fighting for their lives here. I mean, the next couple of weeks, we're talking that they're, we're looking at they're going to be out of playoff contention within the next couple of weeks. Obviously, the eye test tells us, Jacksonville's definitely not making the playoffs. But, Doug Peterson is coaching for his life. And we got some good news last week. I want to correct myself from last week. I mentioned that Brian Thomas was going to be out 2 to 4 weeks. But, randomly he wasn't. So they didn't put him on IR by Tuesday or Wednesday. And he practiced Wednesday. I think he was limited Thursday. Was able to go this week. He only had, 2 catches for 22 yards. But, this upcoming week against Minnesota is a little bit of a trap game. You mentioned we talked about the Vikings to open up this episode. I'm a little concerned for their secondary. Yes, Joe Flacco struggled. But I do think that you are able to pass on them, especially on the road. So Jacksonville is home this weekend against Minnesota. And kind of look at the targets that Trevor's kind of working with. You have Evan Ingram back. He's healthy. You have, Parker Washington, who, didn't do much, but he is that next guy. And we're, you and I and my brothers were a little bit familiar with Parker Washington. We're not underestimating his talent. As well as, Brian Thomas is there. We're not sure what's the status on Gabe Davis, if he can come back or not. I'm not sure if they're going to throw him on IR maybe. It's still up in the air. But you do have 2 backs with ETN and Tanks Bigsby are they're healthy. They're capable of moving the ball. And I do think that Minnesota has a tough rushing game, tough rushing defense. And I do like this game to be a potential shootout. This is a little bit of a trap game for Minnesota. I do think that the Jags, if it's great weather there in Florida, I do think that they have a little shootout there. So I do like Trevor Lawrence. I want to add one last thing on the quarterback side. I actually also like Russell Wilson. This is kind of a little bit of a bonus. They are in Washington, so that's why a lot of people are kind of second guessing it. But this is going to be Russell Wilson's kind of first away game of the year. His first two starts with the Steelers were home against the two New York teams. So that's another quarterback to throw out there. So yeah, what do you think about this? I mean, you like Trevor, you like Russell. I mean, what do you think? What do you think? I'm on the money here, Justin?
I actually really like both of the takes. With Lawrence in this game, obviously we've seen Jacksonville have some success with the rushing game, right? With Tank, ETN not so much, but Tank's been kind of the story of the last month. Minnesota is very solid against the run. They're top 5 to top 7, I believe. So I don't expect them to be able to be successful rushing the football against Minnesota this week. And the fact that BTJ, which I wouldn't even apologize for. All the news sites were saying, hey, BTJ is probably going to be out 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And I was, worried, ready to put him on my IR slot in my fantasy league. But then he started practicing, was able to give it a go. And he played 91% of snaps. So it wasn't like, oh, he only played, 50 and they were just, using him as a decoy. Like, he was out there for more than the rest of the receivers in this game. So that's good news for Trevor Lawrence that his wide receiver looks to be in good health for this game. It's a home game, and they just lost a close one on the road against Philadelphia, which you were mentioning. But with Russell, I'm kind of on the fence. I feel like Washington has been somewhat improved on the defensive side of the football, but what helps Russell is I think Washington's going to be able to score this week on Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's going to need to kind of catch up. And they had the bye week, so maybe it's another week of incorporating himself as the quarterback one. But since you got a bonus, when you were talking about Lawrence, I kind of want to throw out a bonus player that he will not be my receiver waiver wire pickup of the week. There's another guy I'll mention, but Parker Washington, I think, is someone that is worth scooping up in your fantasy leagues. He's only owned in 3.9% of leagues. He was on the field for 85% of snaps, so he's taking that role of Christian Kirk. But it's like a Christian Kirk 1/2. And I know Christian Kirk's a short guy, but I just mean, you know what I mean, like output.
Yeah.
I think Parker Washington might be a guy that with the right matchup, which Minnesota is a very good matchup against wide receivers. This could be a week for Parker Washington. And if you look at the next 3 games, they play Minnesota, very solid run defense, poor pass defense. And they play Detroit, very, very solid run defense, average to under average pass defense. Then they have their bye week. Then they play Houston, above average run defense, poor pass defense. So Jacksonville looks like they're going to be throwing the football a lot. And BTJ obviously is BTJ. I'm excited for him, and especially that he's healthy and good to go. But Parker Washington, not owned in many places, could be a guy you could just throw out on a flyer. I feel like nobody's talking about him this week, even though he might just be the worst wide receiver 2 for this team rest of the season. But moving to my running back pickup, a guy that he kind of surprised me with his usage this week. It was on Sunday Night Football, and it was Cam Akers. So obviously you would think that, what we've seen all season is, Ty Chandler is the number 2 for Aaron Jones. When Aaron Jones is tired or gets nicked up, it's Ty Chandler that was stepping in. But a couple weeks ago, we saw Cam Akers get traded to the Vikings from the Texans. And I just thought he'd be a depth piece, third string running back behind Chandler. Because, we saw Chandler have a brief couple of weeks last year where he was a starter and he was good. Especially that I remember a Bengals game in particular where he got like 28 points or something crazy like that in the fantasy playoffs. But it's clear that now with Akers being traded to Minnesota, he has become the RB2 behind Aaron Jones. And he, in fact, got, 22% of snaps. Nothing too crazy. But Aaron Jones is known to be a guy that gets injured. I think we can both agree, as we talked about last week, the running back waiver wire is still pretty underwhelming. But Cam Akers might be a prime handcuff guy that you could grab for a guy who's behind Aaron Jones, who is injured often, unfortunately. That's kind of been his thing. He misses a game or two, a couple games. But I think he's well worth the pickup, only owned in 11% of leagues. Just scoop him up. He's not a starting play or anything, but could be a good guy if there is an injury down the stretch. Could be a great guy to have in your starting lineup.
Yeah, Justin, I would say this is one of the worst years running back waiver wire history.
Yeah.
I mean, Justin, last year, there was guys like Chase Brown that you can get. There was some, Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders kind of went back and forth last year. Even like in Philadelphia, there was, Swift was on the Eagles. You could probably pick up Gainwell, stuff like that, Justin. But this year is not like that at all. It seems like week 3, week 4 was the last kind of, heyday of running back waiver wire. And it kind of, I want to point out a quick thing going into next year's fantasy drafts where you might have to go a running back, hero RB strategy is what they call it, where you kind of pick, 2 to 3 running backs within the first 4 rounds, maybe like 2 running backs, which are within your first picks. I know the way fantasy football is trending now is you draft the wide receiver. But Justin, you can get so many good wide receivers week in and week out. We're going to get to some receivers here in a second. And these guys you can pick up and they can, plug and play and they have a great game. You just mentioned Parker Washington, who can have a great game next week. But it's got to be one of the worst running back waiver wires you'll ever see. And you mentioned, Cam Akers, but Aaron Jones is still healthy and like he could take off, but Aaron Jones gets hurt. He's going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, when he's hurt, he is really hurt. Last year he kind of missed a good chunk of the season, even the year before that, and Rodgers' last year a few years ago. And, we had some A.J. Dillon games and stuff like that when he was in, when Aaron Jones was a Packer. And so, you just never know with Aaron Jones. And so, and it's a little sad that Ty Chandler is kind of pushed to the back. They traded for Cam Akers. We like Ty Chandler. You mentioned he had a great, fantasy playoffs. He had a good game, like you mentioned, and it sucks that he's now in the doghouse. Kind of hopes he gets traded to somewhere that they need a running back. But for me, I'm going to go with Ray Davis. Not ultra attractive, and there's nothing wrong with James Cook. But, I had high hopes for this week for James Cook, and unfortunately, he really didn't do much. He only had, 44 rushes. He only had 10 carries. Justin. And James Cook only had, he did have 5 catches for 25 yards, but nothing too special in a game where, Josh Allen had a great fantasy game. But, Ray Davis, he did have a receiving touchdown and for 63 yards there. And so, see, that's something James Cook should have had. I do think that, Ray Davis had 4 carries for 20 yards and James Cook had 10 for 44. I just like James. I like Ray Davis. If he would have had 10 carries, I do believe he would have had more yards than James Cook. That Buffalo, backfield is really weird, really shaky. But Ray Davis is only owned in 13.9% of leagues. They also kind of throw in Ty Johnson in there, here and there. But I would say if you have the room, maybe kind of snag Ray Davis. I think he's a dark horse to have a great game this week in Indianapolis. So maybe a potential another receiving touchdown, maybe a goal line touchdown there. But Ray Davis is a guy for me, Justin, is the best running back available in, the waiver wire. I think the second best to me is probably like Justice Hill.
Yeah, it's pretty rough in the streets. I think Ray Davis though is a very solid handcuff to have. I don't know if you can start him. I mean, he did have a big touchdown, but it was kind of a one-off play. But as you mentioned, kind of this area of the season, you need to have like a good handcuff for if you have James Cook and he goes down, you don't want to be caught, with no depth and nothing to kind of back it up with. So why not have Ray Davis only owned in 14% of leagues? So he's out there and he's on the field every week. It's not like, he gets absolutely nothing. Like he had a long touchdown. He always gets touches. He's been getting some goal line area touches. So I think it's worth the pickup.
Sure.
And then you mentioned Justice Hill. It's kind of the same boat. He gets some catches, which is good. I feel like that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck there. I think the last maybe like throwaway player maybe you could scoop up is Emmanuel Wilson. We saw Jacobs kind of come in and out of the game this week with injury. And Emmanuel Wilson stepped in there and he looked very good. So I just think something to keep your eye on. I think Jacobs will be good. But hey, you never know. And if Jacobs were to miss time, Emmanuel Wilson would slot in to be a really solid running back. Jumping to wide receiver, obviously I mentioned Parker Washington earlier. But actually, wait, before I mention this name, by the time you guys are listening to this, well, it's going to be Tuesday, and today is the trade deadline. If you're right when you're listening to this, so there's not much you can actionably do besides just wait and hear of any names that are traded. I haven't heard too many rumors about major fantasy players. I've heard a lot of defense, but if an offensive player gets moved, that's kind of where you need to act quickly and see if that change helps or hurts certain players. Kind of a little PSA in between our in our episode, but I just thought about it how it is tomorrow. So obviously we've seen trades over the last couple of weeks with Adams and Cooper and Deontay Johnson, Cam Akers,
Hopkins.
Sorry, yeah, perfect. Who just went off tonight? But like that's kind of thing you need to look out for if if a team is a big seller. I don't know. For example, just like the Cowboys could be teams that sell at the deadline, or a team that's right on the cusp. Like maybe the Dolphins want to make a late run, they can make a move, or just anything that's possible. Anything's really possible. Just stay tuned on it. Obviously, you won't hear from us until the next day, so we'll analyze anything that does go down. But stay tuned because you'll need to make some waiver wire moves and adjustments depending on if anything big happens. But anyway, back to the waiver wire. At wide receiver, I have Demarcus Robinson, Rams wide receiver. Last week he got that touchdown on Thursday night, or 2 touchdowns on Thursday night against the Vikings. And he only had 2 catches, and I think we kind of discussed, we were kind of like, it's kind of a one-off, something you can't really rely on, especially with, Kupp and Puka there. But coming into this week, obviously I know Puka got, ejected for punching somebody, which was crazy.
Yeah.
But Demarcus Robinson took advantage and had 2 touchdowns, but on 9 targets this time. And that's raised my attention enough for me to say that he is worth a pickup in your fantasy leagues. I mean, he's only owned in 12.5% of leagues. This team seems to be very pass happy. And Kupp and Puka are very solid pieces, but Robinson has been a guy that Stafford's relied on pretty heavily over the last month, and so I think he's well worth a pickup.
Yeah, Justin, looking at this, Rams receiving core, I don't think Puka's going to face any suspension there. So he should be good to go, bearing any injuries. But I wouldn't be surprised, Justin, if he does. The league has kind of cracked down a little bit on, physical altercations, although it didn't look too bad. But you just never know with this league. So I would say there's a 50-50% chance that Puka actually does miss, this Monday night game home with Miami. But I wouldn't bank on it. But like I said, there's a chance. And Cooper Kupp, you just never know with them. Obviously had a great game yesterday with over 100 yards. But, Demarcus Robinson is now that third guy. And you got to look at the Rams, right? They're 4-4. They're second in their division, right? And they're trying to make a playoff push. They're home next Monday night. And this could potentially be a shootout. I'm hoping this is a shootout. You have one side with Miami. They're fully healthy. They got Tyreek. They got Waddle, who scored a touchdown but still had negative receiving yards. And then, on the other side, you have Puka and Cooper. So this is like the, matchup of like the 2 best wide receiving duos, or one of. You can't forget about Jamar and T. Higgins, even though T. Higgins in play. However, this Rams team's on the hunt, and Demarcus Robinson is going to be that third guy that's not getting any attention from defenses there. And the Rams, the Dolphins, they have a former Ram in Jalen Ramsey who's going to be covering at least Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua. And Jalen Ramsey did get an interception yesterday off a tipped catch off of Keon Coleman. However, I do think that that's going to open a lot of opportunities for Demarcus Robinson there. He did get that game-winning touchdown. And he's looked phenomenal there. And, like I mentioned, this team is going to be a pass-heavy team. They have a great running back in the backfield. So it's going to be confusing a lot of defenses, and Stafford can get the ball to them. And 2 touchdowns, 94 yards yesterday for 6 catches for Demarcus Robinson. I definitely like it a lot. So I'm not sure if I'm starting him just yet, but hey, I wouldn't mind throwing them there in a flex play. There are quite a handful of teams, on bye. If you were starting Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf in the flex. There's other teams that, maybe if CeeDee Lamb misses, Justin, obviously he's healthy, but if he misses, maybe you can kind of go that route there. Things like that. But for me, Justin, my wide receiver is going to be Rashod Bateman. Now, I know all of Dwayne Nation is like, wait a minute, what? Now, let me explain. Look, I know Deontay Johnson is now a Raven. However, I do think it's gonna take some time for him to get acclimated into this offense. And I want to let you guys know that the Ravens do play this Thursday night against Cincinnati. So still not enough time for Deontay Johnson to kind of get all the understanding of the plays that he needs. And Zay Flowers has kind of been cooking the last couple weeks. And I do think that maybe there's a chance that this Thursday night he kind of takes a step back. And there's no doubt that Lamar Jackson is playing so great this year. He's easily the MVP right now. I kind of think it's locked in. I think the only person that can compete with him is his teammate Derrick Henry. We're gonna get to that in another episode, Justin. But Zay Flowers, I do think that maybe he can take a step back this week. And Rashod Bateman, Justin, he is tied on the Ravens for touchdowns with Zay Flowers, so 3 touchdowns apiece. His longest catch of the year is 59 yards, which I believe leads the team. And you know what, Justin? His targets, he's what? 3rd in catches with 25. And as far as targets, we're looking at 2nd there. So definitely like, Rashod Bateman this week. You can potentially start him. And Joe Burrow's been playing at a phenomenal level. So if he can go into M&T Bank and bring his A game, hopefully they can have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I do think that this can be a shootout. And with shootouts, it always calls for Rashod Bateman's name. I think yesterday the game kind of got out of hand against Denver. So Lamar was kind of just winging it and playing it safe. He was still able to have a great game. But Rashod Bateman is a guy that he can move into a great, wide receiver 2 spot with Deontay Johnson. I want to point out that, the first couple of weeks of this year when Deontay Johnson was with the Panthers, it took him a little bit to kind of get acclimated. It wasn't until like week 3 or 4 when Andy Dalton got pushed in and they needed to kind of go off. Then Deontay Johnson kind of took off from there. So I do think that Rashod Bateman is going to benefit this because he's not getting enough, attention now. I know Mark Andrews is heating up a little bit. Zay Flowers is heating up a little bit. Obviously, defenses all over the league are terrified of number 22 in the backfield. So I do like Rashod Bateman, a guy that you can definitely add to your, roster. And it's, these next couple weeks, we're going to have bye weeks. Obviously, week 10, we're going to have a, good amount of bye weeks. Rashod Bateman is a guy you can definitely plug and play for sure.
Yeah, so the way I look at this one is I'm going to agree with you all the way up to only this week. So
okay, yeah.
I think this week he's a prime play with everything you were mentioning. I think Thursday night's going to be a shootout. Deontay Johnson's not fully involved into this offense yet. I think things are it's going to get too muddy after this week or maybe after the next couple of weeks when Deontay, falls into that because I think Deontay's a better wide receiver, so he'll fall into the wide receiver 2 role while Flowers is the 1 and Bateman is the 3, and you could argue the 4 versus, like receiving pass catchers with Andrews there. And that just makes it tough for me, especially because they're a run-first team. But I like this week, and I do like the fact that Bateman still had more snaps and a higher snap percentage than Zay Flowers did this week. Ooh. So a lot. I mean, obviously Flowers had the big money line stat number this week, but Bateman was on the field more. So at least he's on the field and he has the opportunity. I do think it'll be more difficult post week 10 for him, but this week I think he's well worth a scoop and play if you have, Jaden Reed or you were relying on one of the other Packers catchers or you had Jacoby Myers or DK Lockett, JSN, there's some names out there that you could have been relying on, but they have a bye week. So that's kind of my take with Rashod Bateman. Moving to our defensive streamers of the week, me and Genoa here, we got one each to discuss, and I have a team that won't even be playing in the United States this week, and it is the New York Giants. They are playing in Germany against the Carolina Panthers, and the Giants' defense has been solid, kind of middle of the pack. So it's not a huge testament to their skill as a defense, but I think games in Germany are always kind of sloppy and mucky and not great offensive performances. And 2, it's the Carolina Panthers. I know they pulled off a huge upset against the Saints, but you see what happened to the Saints. They just fired their coach because of it, because the Panthers are not a great team. So I expect that game's going to be very low scoring. And I expect the Giants, who are only owned in 4.5% of leagues, to be a very solid plug and play this week, just for 1 week, against the Panthers.
Yeah, Justin, definitely like that. Bryce Young had a okay game yesterday, but the Panthers, I do think they're going to kind of go back to struggling. They already have 2 wins on the year. They're one of the worst teams in the league, so I do think that there's a chance that they can possibly lose out. And the Giants are a solid defense there. Daniel Jones kind of loses a lot of games for this team. The defense doesn't get enough shine and enough credit for how much they, have New York in. I know a few weeks ago they only had 3 points. And against the Eagles, they were kind of able to take off in Saquon's return. This Giants defense, they're going to go overseas. And I do think that Bryce Young is going to, kind of struggle. And, a defensive player that people are not talking about too much is Dexter Lawrence. I mean, this guy's a run stopper. He kind of leads that defensive line there with Thibodeau. And, this defense, they get a lot of credit. I think Dable kind of does everything he can with what he has. And you know what? I do like the Giants going into next year and beyond. This defense, this team needs a win, first of all, Justin. And I do think that they definitely get it there. Brian Dable's definitely going to have his team ready to go. And I do think that Bryce Young is going to struggle a lot. He's going to be under pressure all game. I don't think he completes more than 15 passes this week overseas. And so I like it a lot, Justin. For me, it's going to be the Bears home with the Patriots. I hope I'm not jinxing myself, Justin, because I'm going to be starting the Bears this upcoming week. They're home. They're one of the best defenses at home. They just kind of got ran all over by Arizona yesterday. Kyler Murray really didn't have to do anything. Marvin Harrison only had 25 yards passing or catching, excuse me. This week I think they're very ticked off. They've had 2 really brutal losses. Obviously, 2 weeks ago, the Hail Mary in Washington, the tipped Hail Mary by Noah Brown, and this 29-9 victory. I mean, it was just pure domination by Arizona. Caleb Williams couldn't do anything, and this defense cannot do anything, cannot stop the run. James Conner had a great game, and even Amari Demarcus had a great. I think he was a touchdown outside of 50 yards there right before halftime. Justin, I mean, what a defensive miscue. Obviously, what's going on with Stevenson, benching himself or him getting benched and him leaving practice in the middle of last week. I think the Bears, defense gets rejuvenated this week. They're in Chicago, going against a rookie quarterback with a rookie head coach, and an offensive line isn't quite so well. We haven't even heard from Ramondre all that well. I think he did score a touchdown actually, but this defense, I think they're going to be really ticked off in Soldier Field. I do think that weather inclinations could be kicking in over there in Chicago as we kind of get near winter. So I do like the Bears defense, and they're owned at 43%. So I do think that it's going to be a massive increase after Wednesday. It probably should be 63-70, but definitely get them while you can. I do think they're going to be one of the hottest waiver wire pickups for sure this weekend.
No, I like the Bears a lot this week. They obviously have been struggling mightily over the last couple of weeks. This game against Arizona, to me, they locked in pretty well. Obviously, they lost by 20, and it wasn't great there. But they lost. The Demarcus touchdown was just a poor broken play. Everybody kind of thought that it was a wraps, and they were just going to head into the locker room, and it was a handoff to Demarcus. But it broke loose, and it was a long touchdown. So that one, I don't really put on them. The other two, the McBride touchdown run and the the Benson run was kind of all let up with James Conner, and then the Cardinals have a good rushing attack. So we're gonna discuss more with the Bears team in our next episode, with the takeaways episode. But yeah, so I like that there though. I think the Bears have proven that they're a very good defense this season, and they got a good matchup against New England. I know Drake May let it come back, against Tennessee, but they still only put up 17 points, and we saw some struggles, and Tennessee ended up winning. And Ramondre, he did pull off 2 touchdowns, which is whoa, but he also had 10 carries for 16 yards, so he kind of just fell in the end zone. So
that's all that matters.
Right. So, but that's a kind of luck washover. So I like Chicago there. But yeah, Dewey Nation, that is our waiver wire discussion, our waiver wire show for week 10 of the NFL season. I can't believe we're already in the double-digit weeks. Hopefully you're looking good through those weeks. Hopefully you're in that at least that 4-5 and higher range. Even it'd be much better if you were 5-4. Was it 6-3, 7-2, 8-1, or if you're lucky enough to be 9-0, that'd be crazy. If you're under that, that's why you need. I mean, everybody needs this episode, but you especially need it if you're below that threshold. So use what we have given to you guys, hopefully, and it'll help you out to help you win in the future. But thank you guys for listening, and Genoa, send us out.
Yeah, Domination, thanks for giving us a listen. This is our waiver wire pickups for Week 10. Crazy enough, yeah, Justin, you mentioned it. It is Week 10. But it's going to be a very fun week in there. Kicks off there in Baltimore. So, Domination, we love you guys. Thanks for watching. And as always, peace.